Okay, in this video, we're going to look at some other problems associated with market economies. So other issues that will arise if the government doesn't intervene, and then a bit of information about how the government does intervene to ensure some of those problems don't occur. So these are some things we're going to talk about. And generally, these are focusing on what we call market failures. Market failures is basically when the market fails to maximize our living standards. So what are the problems or issues that occur when you leave the free markets to its own devices and the government doesn't intervene? So all these things will get mentioned here, including overproduction of what we call demerit goods, underproduction of some products, issues when one business has a monopoly and has all the power, exploitation of workers, what's meant by negative externalities. All these things will be touched on throughout this video. So problems with market economies, just to sum up some of the main ones: excessive debt can lead to recession sometimes, which we'll talk about a bit more when we look at the macro economy. Monopolies and oligopolies can form, can lead to environmental problems, inequality in terms of the distribution of income, greed can occur, exploitation of workers, and then overproduction of harmful products and underproduction of products that are beneficial to our living standards. So there's some of the things we're going to focus on as we go through this video. What are some of the key issues associated with market capitalist economies? So starting with overproduction of harmful goods. So the first thing is that in competitive markets, if the government doesn't intervene, producers will only produce product where they could generate a profit. And the problem is that some products that producers can generate a profit from the production of harmful products. So there are products that have what we call negative externalities, which are third-party costs associated with transactions. So a negative externality is when the third-party cost associated with production or consumption of a product. And I'll go through some examples to really hone in on what that actually means. So the problem with market economies is there's an overproduction of what we call demerit goods. When you hear the word demerit good, basically these are products that can have a negative impact on the consumer, and they also often have a negative impact on a third party or someone that isn't part of the transaction. So alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, junk food, gambling, they all have unhealthy and have impacts on the consumer, but they can also negatively impact third parties. So for example, if we start with cigarettes, the negative impact on the consumer is that it can lead to lung cancer, emphysema, difficulty breathing, etc., etc. But there's also a third-party cost, which is a cost. Sorry, good time to do that actually. Third-party costs are costs associated with third parties. So that can basically other people besides the smoker. So that can include people that get infected because of passive smoking, and therefore they develop lung cancer or emphysema as a result of someone else smoking, and increased healthcare costs for the economy as a whole. So other people may have to pay higher healthcare costs to fund all these people that are getting sick. Other problems can be the lack of other problems can be that there's a lack of hospital beds for other people that are sick for other reasons, and that can be bad for the economy or bad for the people that are sick. And it also has other forms of government intervention in the forms of, the government has to intervene. Sorry about that. So because the products have negative externalities, they're often overconsumed because we assume consumers and producers don't care about these third-party costs. So we ignore these third-party costs, and therefore they're overconsumed and produced in a free market. So the government intervenes through things like taxes to stop people from smoking, which raises the price, plain packaging laws, which makes them less appealing, negative advertising campaigns, age restrictions, and limits on where you can smoke. So all these products that we call have negative externalities, basically they have issues for the individual, so alcohol, liver cancer, hangovers, obesity, but they can also cause problems for third parties. So people being affected when people drink driving, people have to pay more tax because we've got to fund the healthcare costs for these people that are drinking too much alcohol, anyone that's affected by alcohol-fueled violence. And therefore, the government intervenes again through things to try and reduce consumption of alcohol. So taxes, age restrictions, lockouts, liquor license, all these things to try and prevent people from drinking alcohol. Same thing with guns and machetes. They can lead to injuries, which can hurt other people. So there's laws against guns and machetes. Illicit drugs can lead to violence, family breakdowns. So there's laws against illicit drugs. And lastly, carbon emissions. So when we produce, businesses often will ignore the third-party costs associated with emitting carbon dioxide. So that can lead to rising sea levels, airborne diseases, increased natural disasters, polluted waterways, and all those things can have a harmful impact on third parties. And therefore, the government intervenes through things like carbon taxes, subsidies for producing renewable energy, and laws against pollution to try and stop them or stamp them out. Secondly, there's underproduction of what we call beneficial goods. So some products have a benefit for third parties, which means they have a positive impact on people that aren't involved in the transaction. So a positive externality is when there's a third party benefit that occurs from consumption or production. So examples, what we call merit goods. So demerit goods are things that are harmful. Merit goods are products that are in the nation's best interest and are generally underproduced. So things like education, healthcare, welfare, these are things that would be underproduced because often there's not enough profit to be made from selling them. And they have third-party benefits for other people. So education is a big one. Producers will only provide education in a free market if they can make a profit. This means that education will essentially be under-allocated in a free market. And some students will choose not to go, given the costs will be more than their own private benefits. So, for example, if it costs $30,000 to go to school, but you only think you're going to get $20,000 in benefits, then you may not go to school. So the third, a lot of these transactions also have third-party benefits, but benefits that go above just the person consuming the product. So, for example, educated citizens generally pay more tax because they get higher paying jobs in the future. It can lead to a more productive and competitive workforce to have more people educated, and often more educated people are less likely to be involved in crime. So there's third-party benefits associated with getting an education. So what the government does is they intervene so that people will take into account these third-party benefits by giving some of the benefits to producers and consumers. So, for example, at a high school level, there's subsidies for private schools. The government provides public schools. The government's there's a minimum school leaving age, so they mean they have to go to school to a certain age, and they also subsidise university as a way to try and increase enrolments as well. Other things, healthcare. Healthcare is often underproduced because people can't generate sufficient incomes. So many sick individuals would not be able to afford treatment, and therefore they wouldn't get access. They wouldn't necessarily get a suboptimal level of healthcare. Streetlights are another example where there's benefits for society as a whole from less crime and things like that, so the government intervenes. But basically, positive externalities, products that have benefits for third parties. The next problem with market economies is there's exploitation of workers. So as we know, producers are profit motivated and therefore they may underpay their workers and not give them the right health and safety conditions. So the government steps in for minimum wages. So everyone must get paid at least $19 an hour, it is now. Unfair dismissal laws, so you can't just sack people on the spot to try and protect workers. You've got to give them notice. Rules on workers' hours, so they don't have to work over a certain amount of time. And unions have also been established to try and protect workers' rights as well. As another thing that can be a problem with free market. Okay, the third thing that can occur in market economies is businesses can often abuse their market power. So often what can happen is some firms are able to produce at lower costs because they might be bigger, have access to better technology. Businesses can often be exploit that market power. So they might have all these strategies to try and maximize their profits. So things like price fixing and predatory pricing, which we'll talk about in a second.